What's going on? This is video number 9 of my Guitar 101 video series. Today we are talking about smooth chord changes. I have 7 tips to help you change between chords more effectively and also a bit quicker. This is something that a lot of people run into that they struggle with when they're first playing guitar. They can't do their chords in time and they get frustrated. Okay? So hopefully this can help a lot of people. Anyway, let's get to it. Tip number 1. When you're switching between chords, don't move your fingers so far away from the neck. Okay, I see people switching between chords and they're like this. They go. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but still, my point is proven there, I think. When you do that, that is completely unnecessary movement. If you're in this constant state of moving back and forth away from the strings all the time, that's completely unnecessary movement that is hurting your speed to get back to the chord. Okay? If you follow my upcoming tips, it'll help with this a lot. Okay? I don't exactly have an exercise or anything to help with this. It's just something you got to kind of look out for. And I think if you do the upcoming stuff, it'll help you a lot with that. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, look for common fingers amongst chord shapes. So a great example of this is when you go an E minor to a C chord. All right? So when you're on an E minor, you got your second finger right here, okay, on the 2nd fret on the D string. At least you should. That's the more proper fingering. Okay. When you go to a C, you shouldn't have to move that finger at all. Look at me. I'm not moving it at all. I'm on C, I'm on E minor, C, E minor, whatever. Okay. So be on the lookout for those common fingers and keep them there. Don't lift them off. All right. Going back to tip 1, don't lift them off all far away. Okay. Keep them there. And if you keep them there, this will help with tip number 1. Because your fingers are naturally being closer to the strings. So let me show you some other great common fingers. Like I said, E minor to C, E minor to A minor as well. Alright. I did have to scooch that finger a little bit, but I still am on the same fret. It's not that big of a movement still. E minor to G has your first finger. Okay. And then here's one that a lot of people don't notice, but G to D has your 3rd finger in common. See, I'm not lifting that off at all. That can help a lot with that transition. People really struggle with that one for some reason. C to A minor actually has 2 common fingers. You got your 2nd finger and your 1st finger. Once again, I kind of had to scooch my 2nd, but still, it's not that big of a movement. Okay, I don't have to move my 1st at all on that one. So look for those and do your best to keep those common fingers down. You don't need to lift them off. Okay, maybe you have to scooch them a bit, but you don't need to lift them off at all. So that's tip number 2. Okay, tip number 3 is a little bit trickier and it's kind of different for everybody. But basically, tip number 3 is make sure your fingers aren't going to anywhere that is unnecessary. So the most common example I see for this is C going to D. Now I don't know what it is, but when people are on the C, they try to go to D and they move their 3rd finger clear out in this area. Okay, not even on the guitar at all. All right, now if we think about it, let's eliminate the other fingers. My 3rd finger just needs to go from there to there. It doesn't need to go from there to here to there. Okay. Look at that, completely unnecessary movement. So what do you do to fix that? What that tells me is that that finger is a weak finger in that transition for you. So you need to make that finger a more dominant finger. You kind of got to retrain your brain. So what you need to do is when you go from C to D, move that 3rd finger first, okay? Even if you don't have these guys down yet, get that 3rd finger there first, then plant them down. And what that'll do is that you will be paying more attention to the movement of that finger, and you will be retraining your brain to make that a more dominant finger in that transition. And you will naturally start to do it a bit better. Another great example of this is D going to G. So sometimes what people like to do, are second and first finger go clear up here, they drag the third and fourth finger with them. Okay, they're clear over here near the lower strings when they need to be right here, right? Okay, this is really silly. For one, I already mentioned this, D to G has a common finger, right? It's that third finger. Shouldn't have to move at all. And the pinky doesn't have that far to go either. It's just right there. It just needs to be planted down on the third fret on the first string. So, I mean, the only fingers that really need to move are those two. Okay, so look for that. Don't move that third finger and drag them with it. Completely unnecessary movement that is killing your D to G transition. Okay, now this tip, like I said, it's different for everybody. People are always doing different things with this. So you really got to pay attention, watch each finger as you do your transitions and see if they're going somewhere dumb like that. And take that finger, make it a more dominant finger. Okay, so let's go to tip number 4. Somewhat related. Tip number 4 is basically aim to get your fingers to the chord at about the same time, if not at the exact same time. So a great example of this is C again. A lot of people like to make C a 3-step process. So they go first finger, they go second, and then they go third. Okay, that was 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. When watch me do C right now. Boom, there's C. It was a 1-step process. Okay, so once again, this tells me you got some weak fingers on that C chord. And once again, it's the third finger, okay? So try doing C, get that third finger there first, make it more dominant. And over time, you will slowly start to make that less of a 3-step process. And once you feel comfortable, you kind of just got to try to get them there at the same time, okay? A huge thing there, make chords a 1-step process. Get them there at the same time. Cool. Tip number 5, look for common shapes. So a great example of this is E major going to A minor. Now that is not a hard chord transition at all. There's no common fingers, but it has the same shape. Okay, my second finger and third finger are on the same fret. Okay, they're on 2 different strings though, but still they're on the same fret, and this first finger is just a fret behind them on the first fret, a string above them. Okay, and it's the same situation on A minor. The only difference is my fingers on E are on the 5th, 4th, and 3rd string, whereas on A minor they're on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd string. So instead of doing like this, here's E, lift off my fingers, break the shape, go back, and look at how far I went away from the neck. Instead of doing that, watch. I just gently lift them up, I keep the shape, and I just move to those other strings. Okay? Now this is a very specific tip. This doesn't work with every chord, right? It doesn't work with most chords. But that's a very great example of that happening. Okay? And this is a tip that I know I didn't talk about it in this series, but it helps a lot with bar chords and power chords. So like let's say I got a power chord right here and I want to go clear up here. Okay? If I do this, I'm on this power chord, I lift it off, I break the shape, I move far away from the neck, and I go here. It's so much more effort compared to this. I got the shape, I keep the shape, I move it, and boom, I just plant it down on that fret. Much more effective way if you're doing power chords and bar chords, okay? If there's a common shape between chords, keep that shape. All right, tip number 6, okay? This is a tip that, you know, take it very lightly. Don't rely on this one too much. But basically tip number 6 is this. Consider doing alternate fingerings for chords. So a great example of this is G. Okay, a lot of people know this G, all right, the one I showed you earlier with both the 3rd and 4th finger. Sometimes people do G without the pinky, and they actually move the 3rd finger to the top. I'm going to show you another G. Some people know this one, some don't. You go like this. Okay, so with that, I got my 3rd finger on the 3rd fret on the 6th string. I got my 2nd finger on the 2nd fret, the 5th string, and I got my pinky on the top on the 3rd fret, on the 1st string. Okay, why did I do this? This is a very helpful way to do G when the next chord coming up is a C. Because for one, look, tip number 5, I got a common shape here with these 2 fingers. I just scooch them up. Then all I gotta do is just lift off my pinky and add my first finger over here. That is a much simpler transition than this. Look at how much movement I have to do between those. But this, not as much movement there. But here's some things to consider with that. One, I did change the chord a bit. Okay, you know, it's totally fine. You can use either G. It's not the end of the world. It's okay. But there might be other instances. It really depends on the situation where that's not okay. And also, this can be a little bit confusing because if you're giving yourself more than one fingering for a chord, when you go to that chord, you got to make an extra decision where it's like, well, do I do that fingering or that fingering? So this gives you this whole weird situation where you can get confused, and sometimes you'll do this other fingering and it actually might hurt you, especially if you're really playing in the moment. Okay, so be careful with this tip, but there are times where it is very notable and you might want to think about it, especially with more advanced chords. This tip isn't as helpful with like open string chords, but later on when you get doing some crazier stuff, this tip actually can come in handy. So that's tip number 6. Alright, finally I'm on my last tip here. So this is tip number 7. Don't let your head get in the way of you switching between the chords in time. So I have seen people where they're taking lessons from me, and those first 6 tips, they totally get the hang of it. Everything, their chord changes, they're looking beautiful, they're on their game. They still don't switch between chords in time. Why? It's because it's in your head. It's a mental thing. You need to get used to switching between chords in time. You need to train your brain to not have a pause. Because what happens is people get learning chords and they get in a habit of always doing a pause. Like maybe they learn a strum to do on the chord. They do like a little, and they go, and they can't switch the chord in time yet. So they're training their brain to do a little pause so they can think about the chord, all right? And that's why you got that pause there. Don't make that pause a habit. Break through it. Hopefully the first 6 tips will help with that, but at a certain point, you got to just kind of force yourself to do it a little bit, even if you maybe accidentally put a finger at a wrong spot or something, whatever. Still, just get to the chord. Force yourself to do it. A cool thing you can do, especially if you're already learning a song, is like if you got, you know, a strum pattern for a song. So like let's say I got a strum pattern and I'm going from G to E minor. So I'll do the strum pattern on G, but I'll just strum E minor once, okay? So I'll do like a, okay? And what that does, sometimes people really struggle with like dealing with the chord transition and also doing the strum. If you eliminate a part of the equation for a second, don't do the strum, don't do the strum on the second chord, okay? It'll help you with the transition and you can focus on that. Just over and over again. Then once you feel like you got that transition down, there's no pause there, you can do a great, go and add that strum and suddenly you're really starting to play the song. And then go ahead and do that with the next chord transition, so on and so on and so on. So don't let your head get in the way. Anyway, those are my 7 tips for changing chords. I hope these help a lot of people. You know, everybody deals with this. Every guitarist. Doesn't matter what style of music you're playing. So keep these in mind when you're switching between chords and practice them a ton, and I hope you get the hang of them. Anyway, I got one more video. It's a little bit more of a laid-back video, but anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this series, and I hope you watched the last one. And yeah, thanks for watching, and have a good one.